And looks like we're good. Okay. Well, welcome this morning, everybody. Thanks for coming and navigating and finding the right room. If you're here for Open Atrium, you're in the right place. If you're here to see Dan Moynier, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's not me. They did some funny stuff in the printing of the schedule. So I'm Mike Potter, and I'm a software architect at Phase 2, and I'm the lead architect for the Open Atrium 2 project. So I've got my email up there if you want to contact me. I've got my Drupal.org handle. I've been doing Drupal for 5 or 6 years now. I'm also the maintainer of the features module, and started working on Atrium 2 about a year ago this time. Took over the project and started taking a look at what we need to do for D7. And I'm happy to announce that we had some exciting news this weekend, and we finally got the beta released. So we are now in a position that you can start using Atrium to build your sites. It's stable. We're not going to be wildly changing everything like we were in alpha and breaking your site every morning. So it's in a good place to start playing with. It still is in beta, however, and we'll talk a little bit later about what that really means and what some of the issues around that might be. So who here has heard of Atrium or knows what Atrium kind of is? And this is presumably Atrium 1, or who actually uses Atrium 1 on a site right now? Okay, good. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about what's different in the new version here as well. So I'm not actually going to do a live demo today because of some network issues I'm having. So we're going to just kind of go through an overview of what Atrium 2 is, what's out of the box, what's not out of the box, and where you can get more information. If you actually want to see some kind of live demo-y, playing around with the interface, go to the Drupal.org project page for Open Atrium, and I've linked a whole bunch of different webinars there from various states from alpha through beta that show off some of those features.
Does
But first,
Pantheon have the
yes, and we'll actually
well?
talk about the Pantheon has the beta as of yesterday morning now. Yeah, there was a little bit of a delay.
Do you have the new Wi-Fi information?
That's not my problem with the network.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I do have the new Wi-Fi version. My problem with the network is their expired SSL key. Anyway, so, but that's fine. We don't really actually have a lot of time for a demo. We would be here for hours. I just did an 8-hour training session on Atrium on Wednesday where we went through a very long demo. So I'll talk all day, but unfortunately we only have 45 minutes. So let's just look for the people that don't know what Atrium is. What are we talking about here? So Open Atrium is a collaboration platform. It's designed to help organizations manage their communications, their teams, and their knowledge. So you're hearing a lot about collaboration platforms here. Hopefully you saw Jeff's talk yesterday on that, but that's what Atrium is all about. It is not like Atrium 1 being focused so much on project management. It's a collaboration tool. So who is it for? It's for basically any organization that needs to collaborate. So anybody who has teams or clients or affiliates in different chapters around the country or affiliates around the world who need a common platform to communicate and collaborate and manage and share their knowledge. So in terms of what Atrium does at a really high level, it has both native features, so there's out-of-the-box features for knowledge management, for collaboration and communication, but it is also a pluggable framework, and this is really key in Atrium 2. We're not going to deliver everything out of the box. There's no way we can do that. We don't have the resources, and frankly, it's not going to meet your needs. So we build a pluggable framework that can be extended and is intended to integrate with your enterprise-level applications. So for example, if you are using best-in-class tools for things like ticketing or time management or project management or asset management, Atrium is meant to integrate with those tools. So Atrium, it's not a either-or proposition. You're not looking to replace everything you're using and come use Atrium. It's meant to work with what you have because your needs are going to change. You're not going to replace your legacy systems overnight. You need something that's going to integrate and evolve with you over time. So a little bit of, oh, it's the Phase 2 guys now, watch out. Uh-huh, yeah. Seats are in the back. It's over just a little bit soon. So a little bit of history. And I have to stay over here for the mic. Sorry, I can't go around that side. So a little bit of history on Atrium. Atrium has been around for a long time. It was actually the most used distribution of Drupal 6 install profile. It was actually written by a company called Development Seed, and they did some great stuff. A lot of the modules we kind of use today came through this. For example, the features module I work on came from Atrium and came from Development Seed. Context, spaces, a lot of these modules that people used, especially in D6, came from this and were developed specifically for Atrium. Well, Development Seed decided to go off and do stuff like Mapbox, which is really cool if you haven't seen it, and kind of got away from the custom site build stuff. So Phase 2 acquired a lot of their assets, and we used it on projects like the White House. It's used from, in big organizations down to small organizations, and it's in Atrium 1 used a lot as a project management tool and a project tracking tool. It's also used to build just intranets, web portals. People build church sites on it, kind of the whole map. However, it's in D6, and as we know, D8 is coming along soon. As soon as D8 is released, D6 is going to be end of life, which means no support. And it was also very what I call antiquated in its features. It did a certain set of things. If you didn't like what it did, kind of tough. If you didn't like how it did it, tough. If you didn't like how it looked, tough. So everything was kind of locked down. The theme was locked down. So it met a need, but people grumble about it. So when we looked at Atrium 2, we really started looking at how people used Atrium 1, but also what we wanted to do moving forward. Did we just want to port modules and call it done? We decided to really use this as an opportunity that we use in all of our kind of D6 to D7 projects, which is let's use this as an opportunity to re-architect and make a best-in-class solution. So we basically, I came in, I was not involved in Atrium 1, we started from scratch. So there's actually no Atrium 1 code in Atrium 2 other than the fact that we use some modules in Drupal like organic groups. But in terms of custom code, we started over and decided to write a Drupal 7 framework-based platform to make it more flexible so that in this case, if you didn't like how it worked, you could fix that. If you didn't like how it looked, you could fix that. We've also made the decisions to make it work not just as an install profile. So in the D6 Open Atrium 1 case, you used it to build your Drupal site from scratch, like you started with it. If you already had a Drupal site, you were out of luck. You had to kind of start over to use it. With D7 and Open Atrium 2, it's now a set of modules that you can just go install. So if you already have a D7 site up and running, there's an Open Atrium core module and some other modules. You go to D.0, you can install those, and you'll have Atrium on your website. It's not a start from scratch proposition. One of the big focuses in the Atrium 2 architecture is on data privacy. Collaboration is really great, but collaboration isn't all public. It's great to share stuff with your friends in Facebook, but you want some control over what you're sharing, especially in an enterprise organization. If you're using Atrium to manage projects, some of those projects need to be private. So in Atrium 1, you had the concept of purely private or purely public. But that wasn't really flexible enough. For example, if I'm on a client project and we're collaborating on something, I clearly, obviously want that project to be private from other projects. Like I don't want all my clients being able to see everybody else's discussion. So kind of all of our projects are private. But even within that private project, I might want to have a little side discussion that the client doesn't see, right? Like, our project managers are talking about how over budget we are, or the developers are talking about how hard this is to do, or whatever, and you don't necessarily want the client involved in those communications. So in the past, we've seen people kind of running multiple versions of Atrium, where they have like, here's the Atrium portal that the client sees, here's the Atrium portal that only we see, and then people accidentally post to the wrong one. And so we really wanted to have a lot more flexible data privacy and access control. If you're going to collaborate and share, you need to know who you're sharing it with.
It's based on organic groups.
Yes, it's still based on organic groups. And so to get to that point, the other kind of mantra I use, I stole something from WebChick when she was at, I think this was Bad Camp. When she was talking about D8, she used a phrase that said, proudly invented elsewhere. Which in D8, the idea is she was talking about things like Symfony and Twig and a lot of these things that are coming into D8 where we're kind of embracing other stuff that's out there. And I thought that was great because that's what I wanted to do. Like, we don't have infinite resources at Phase 2 to just write free software to give it away. Like, we have a business to run as well. And so we have limited resources. Do I want to spend my time writing another WYSIWYG editor for Drupal? Like, Open Atrium needs a WYSIWYG. That was one of the things Atrium 1 didn't have, that we need in Atrium 2. I don't want to spend my time doing that. I don't want to worry about how you lay out blocks on a page. I want to focus on collaboration and collaboration tools. So in this case, we built Atrium on top of another existing distribution called Panoply, which is a panels-based distribution. If you've never seen Panoply, there's a session in this room right after this actually on Panoply. So stick around and see some of it in action. They do a great, cool demo. I think Keenan's going to do a good job on that. So I'll talk a little bit about what Panoply is a little bit later in terms of what that brings to us. But basically, it's an integration around the panels set of modules. So just as organic groups has kind of been a core module for Atrium, panels is a core module for Panoply, and now Atrium is going to embrace both of those universes. And then, as I mentioned, it's plugin based for extensibility. So you're not going to see everything out of the box. We can never produce everything out of the box that you're going to need. Everyone's got different needs. The idea is you can write some plugins to make this do what you need to do. And then on the theme layer, we really changed our philosophy there. And instead of making kind of this really fancy looking theme that was kind of big and bloated and you couldn't really change without losing functionality, which is what Atrium 1 had, we went with a very lightweight theme. We obviously wanted it to be responsive and mobile ready. And when we started looking at the options for Drupal, the requirements were responsive, mobile ready. So there's some good themes for that in Drupal. There's things like Omega and adaptive theme stuff. Then it has to work with panels because we're using Panoply. So that kind of made it difficult to use things like Omega. But we didn't want this big heavyweight thing that people had to carry around. So we actually we did something unusual. We went and we asked designers and themers, what would you guys like to use? And they're like, well, have you heard of these great things like Zerb Foundation and Bootstrap, Twitter Bootstrap? And we're like, well, what are those? And there are these CSS frameworks that kind of give you a set of CSS and JavaScript functionality that you can use out of the box to do some really cool stuff. And when you're hiring themers know how to use this stuff. They don't necessarily know Drupal, but they know Bootstrap, they know Foundation. So it's a lot easier for themers to build themes that are based on these kind of frameworks. So we decided to use that for Atrium 2. We found a theme called Radix, which is a Bootstrap-based theme for Panoply. And it had I think 15 users when we first looked at it, and we decided to use that in Atrium. And people thought I was crazy. What, you're going to use a theme that's only used on 15 sites? Come on. But it's turned out really great for Atrium. So let's go into a little bit more of a deep dive on this stuff. This is an overview. I'm going to have a slide kind of on each one of these. And we've talked about a lot of these features already, but I'll just show you the main slides here as we go through. So first on security, I mentioned that this was really the top focus for the Atrium 2 core architecture design. We really want to be able to give people flexibility within their organizations for how they collaborate. So we created a bunch of terminology that can be a little confusing to start with. We did change some things around. Again, starting from scratch, we're like, okay, let's go out there and look at what other tools are in the collaboration space and what are some concepts that people are already kind of used to. Let's not be tied too much to the old Atrium 1 world. So in Atrium 1, we had organic groups, and so these project areas or microsites or whatever you want to call these little sections of your website were called groups. They were only called groups because they used the organic groups module. That was as much thought as ever went into it. So when we took a new look at it, groups got kind of confusing because if you use a lot of other tools, groups are usually what people think of as access control groups. A group is like a collection of users on your Active Directory or LDAP server, and it's like a permission, almost like a Drupal role, right? So you're going to put somebody in the marketing group because they're a member of the marketing group, or you're going to put somebody in the faculty group of the university. It really has nothing to do with the organic groups concept of putting content and so forth there. So in Atrium 2, we actually have access control groups, just like you're used to in these other tools. So we had to have a different name for the places your content lives. So we are using the term spaces here, which actually comes from another collaboration tool called Confluence that we use. So if you think of your information architecture, or just your kind of the way your web pages are laid out here, where you've got a home page on the top that is your entry portal, and then within that you maybe have some site pages like About Us and Contact Us, and then you have these kind of microsites where maybe you're a university site, and these are your different schools or departments of your university, and they have these content pages within those. So we then subdivide these spaces, first of all, into subspaces. So we support, and I'll get this in the next slide and cover it more, but we support a full hierarchy of spaces and subspaces. So you can go as far as you want down. At the very bottom, you end up in these sections. And a section is just a collection of content. If you're used to Atrium 1, in Atrium 1 you had tabs across the top for like blog and notebook and events and case tracker, and they were called features, which is horribly confusing with the features module and stuff. But those are basically what sections are now. So you have a discussion section, you have a calendar section, you have a blog section or a documentation section. So section is kind of where your content lives. And the reason we distinguish sections from spaces is sections is where you can do the detailed access control. So I can create just a team of people, like the three of us. We can stick ourselves in a team. Within my space, I have control to create my own team. I don't have to go to the sysadmin and have them create a new LDAP group or anything. I can just say, let's put three of us in a team. Let's create a discussion section, assign our team to the discussion section. Now only that team of people can even see that discussion section. So we just created this little private sub-area within our department space or our project space. And the nice thing about separating these out into sections instead of those old feature tabs is now you can have more than one of them. So if you want to have more than one discussion forum, you can have that. I mean, who goes to a forum site where there's only one forum? That's what Atrium 1 was, right? There was blog, that was it. I want my public-facing discussion. I want my private discussion. I want my technical support discussion. I want my end-user discussion. I want different discussion forums, and that's what sections are. These things integrate with identity management systems. So I can assign a LDAP group, for example, to my space. So in the Atrium 1 days, your users come in and you assign users to what spaces that they're a member of, like what project they're going to be in. And you kind of have to do that manually. What if you have LDAP? LDAP already tells you who's in what groups. Why do you have to then come over here and add those people manually? So in Atrium 2, we make that together, we make that tie together so that if you're in your identity management system and you're already in a group, then Drupal knows about it. Yeah, quick question.
Using the D7 LDAP module?
We're using the D7 LDAP module. We actually...
That to work. Website, and it's been a nightmare.
We could talk about that in more detail later, but we actually took a kind of fresh approach. We wrote a module called Open Atrium LDAP. It's a very layered approach. So we wanted to be able to kind of support any identity management system kind of at the bottom layer. So there's the LDAP module, but for example, there's also the simple LDAP module, which is also useful to look at. You might take a look and see if that works a little better. So we wrote kind of an integration layer on top of those between Atrium and your identity management system, so that like it would be easy for somebody to maybe, if they want to do Active Directory, to come in and write a little Active Directory plugin within this system. So take a look at the OA LDAP module, organic groups, or the Open Atrium LDAP module, and it then uses OG LDAP. The OG LDAP name was taken, so we had to create something called OG LDAP API to integrate with organic groups. And then there's a bunch of helper modules, but we put quite a bit of work into that and contributed it all back, so it's all out there now. So we talked about a hierarchical information architecture. This was, again, something you couldn't do in Atrium 1. In Atrium 1, you just had the concept of a group, and that was it. But organizations are more complicated than that. And I do a lot of demos where I kind of use a university structure, because everyone's kind of familiar with universities. But in a university, you have schools, like School of Physical Sciences, or School of Humanities, or School of Engineering. Within those schools, you might have departments, like the chemistry department, the physics department, English department. And then within those individual departments, they want to have their discussions. They want to have an open discussion. They might want to have a discussion with just the students. They might want a discussion with just the faculty. They want to post their event calendar. They want to have some special little project teams that are private. That's where they're doing all their kind of collaboration, is down here at these departments. But you want to support these kind of substructure or these subgroup structures so that, and then inherit members from them. So for example, if I have a faculty group, I can assign my faculty group to one of these schools, and anybody that's in that faculty group becomes an automatic member of my departments. I don't have to go add them individually to every single department or group. We also support multiple parent hierarchies. So for example, I can make a group called faculty and a group called students, and make those as parents to schools. So now anyone who's either a student or a faculty would have access automatically, again, without having to add everybody individually. You can also control how permissions are inherited. So, for example, if I'm the admin of the School of Physical Sciences, you don't necessarily become the admin of your physics space. You can actually control that and how that works. So again, a lot of flexibility to support lots of different information architecture models, but specifically we're focusing on this hierarchical information architecture pattern. So looking at some of the more details, here's our main user interface, that top toolbar. Bootstrap is very kind of, every Bootstrap site seems to have this kind of dark toolbar at the top, so we took that same approach. Obviously, we don't like the colors; those are easy to change. But the basic idea is this is a toolbar that kind of sticks to the top of your page, and kind of from left to right. On the far left, we have an admin button. That's access to the Drupal admin menu, so that only shows up if you're logged in as the Drupal admin, which I was in this case. And that's using the navbar module to give you access to your admin menu. And then you've got what we call a kind of smart breadcrumb navigator. So where it says physical sciences and physics, in this case, this was a page where I was looking at the physics department's page. So I'm in the physics space, but it's showing me that physical sciences is kind of my parent space. So it's in like a breadcrumb sense. It's my next level back. And there's little drop-down arrows, so it's not just a breadcrumb that you click on like a normal breadcrumb, but when you click the little drop-down arrows, you can actually navigate to multiple areas. So for example, that drop-down next to physical sciences would let me navigate between like the physics department and the chemistry department and the math department, those kinds of things. And then to the right of physics where it says home, that's telling us what section of the space that we're in. So in this case, we were in the top level kind of landing page for physics. But if you click that little drop down, that's where you would see your calendar and your discussions and your any kind of section that you have. So that's kind of like taking those tabs in Atrium 1, condensing them into a drop down menu now, because now you can have as many as you want, and so having them as tabs kind of breaks things. You can make them tabs though if you want. Then to the right of that, we have this little plus icon. That's a drop down menu for creating new content. So you click on that, and you get things like add a new event, add a new discussion post. It's actually a smart kind of context. We say contextual content creation. It's kind of contextually aware of the kind of page you're on. So if you're in an event calendar and you click the plus button, there's a create event option. If you're in a discussion section and you click the plus button, it says create new post. If you're in a top level physics space, it still has the create post and the create event, but it knows that when you say create event, you want to create an event down in the calendar section. So it's really smart about where it puts content. Then we've got the little gold star is our favorites drop down, so you can, anytime you're in any space, you can make it your favorite. And when you click that, you see a drop down of all your favorite spaces, so it's really easy to navigate back to things that you use commonly. Then we've got the search bar, and there's a little drop down for that lets you search either within the space you're in or across the whole site or across users. And then on the far right is your little user badge that says you're logged in. In this case, I'm logged in as admin. And when you click on that, it's when you get your profile and logout options. We also have added a UI for your space administrators. So when you're within a space, instead of going to the previous organic groups people page or add people page, which was kind of clunky and cumbersome, we've got a new members page that lets you kind of see all your members. In this case, you can't really see it, but in this case, I've got a pending membership. Someone has asked to join my space, so I've got a little green circle with the number 1 in it, which says I've got some pending users to approve. I can basically go in there and click and get a drop down and say approve or unapprove this person. I can block users, I can promote them as admins, do all those things. So a lot done on the user interface. I mentioned Panoply. So in the Panoply world, you get these buttons along the top of your page called Customize Page and Customize Layout. And when you click Customize Page, you get an interface kind of like this, where you get these kind of dotted region areas and all these little drag and drop widgets. And you can now start dragging stuff around the page. You can flip the layout, so if you want the sidebar on the right instead of the left, or vice versa, you can select one of these 31 responsive layouts. So you can do this at the space page level. So if you're a space administrator, you're in charge of your project, you can change the layout of your space homepage to any of these layouts and start adding content to it, to any subspace and to any section page. So all of those pages are completely customizable. So you get some default templates out of the box. So when you create like a calendar section, it's going to create a nice looking calendar for you by default. It knows that in a calendar section, you probably want to show a calendar, and you probably want a list of upcoming events. When you're in a discussion section, it knows that you probably want a list of recent topics. So we've got some templates defined, and you can actually create your own templates. But on top of that template, you just hit the Customize button, and you start just adding stuff and changing stuff to that page. Users can also use this to change their dashboard. So kind of similar to in Atrium 1, you could kind of do the same thing. You can add blocks to your page, you can move stuff around. But here we're using panels instead of the old Spaces module. The widgets have styles. So actually as a designer, what's really cool, they're one of these buttons, you can't tell on this slide, but it actually looks like a little paintbrush. And you can click that and change the kind of style look of that widget. So like maybe you're at a university and their colors are blue and orange. And so your designer says, okay, I want to create 2 different styles for our website. I want to have the kind of blue block, I want to have the orange block. You'd be able to select that with this paintbrush. So for any content you put there, you could change the style. So you're not giving the user full control over colors. You're not letting them type in any hex code to make pink on blue or something like that. You're letting your designers give them a set of kind of design choices for that site. And then each of these widgets can be customized. There's a little gear icon next to each one. So for example, this recent activity widget is showing you the recent activity that's happening within your space. So whenever somebody posts a new comment or adds a new event, you get an entry here in the space. But what if I only want to show a certain content type? Like let's say I only want to show events. You would click the config button and then you get some configuration options for that widget. And one of the options is what content types do you want to show. So I could take this and change how, what is shown. I don't have to create a whole new widget. I can use some of these very general purpose widgets and just kind of change their configuration. What's the difference between a, list of recent posts in your discussion posts and a list of upcoming events, right? They're both just a list of content. One's showing discussion posts, one's showing events, one's kind of looking at past stuff that's created, one's looking at stuff coming up in the future, but they're basically the same widget. So we ship with a lot of really general purpose widgets that you can put on your page and add to your content. And that's all the Panoply stuff. So again, go to the demo. It's a really cool system, much better than the context spaces stuff that we had in Atrium 1. We talked a little bit about user identity, so we got ahead of ourselves a little bit there. So we did write a module and a set of modules. Take a look at OA LDAP. That's the integration with the LDAP module. And as I mentioned, it would be straightforward to write a plugin for simple LDAP or Active Directory or any other identity management system. The other thing we added to the LDAP module is we did a lot of patching. So when we contributed all those patches up, so if it's been a few weeks since you looked at LDAP, take another look. Some things have been fixed. One thing that we need to do for Atrium is Atrium lets you log in with your email address. The idea of the email address being your kind of unique identifier so that people don't have to worry about remembering, well, what username did I use on this site? Like, well, you used your email address. So we provide support for LDAP authentication via email, where it will look up your email address and your password versus your username. As I mentioned, we support both space and group permission provisioning, so you can tie any space or group in Atrium to an LDAP group, and when you log in, it will bring in that user's permissions. So in LDAP, if you remove somebody from the faculty group, the next time they log into Atrium, they're going to get removed from the faculty group. In addition, we've actually supported a read-write mechanism. So if in Atrium you now go add them back to that faculty group, it's going to write that back to your LDAP server and put you in the faculty group in LDAP. And that's something obviously you can turn on or off, because some LDAP systems you don't necessarily want your Drupal admins being able to access that. But if you really want to have, use the UI in Atrium to manage your groups, and you're working with people who don't, they're not the sysadmin geeks who know LDAP, and you just want to use this UI, you can do that. We also support what's called a mixed mode with LDAP and any other Active Directory service, which is when you first log in and you type in your email address or your username and your password, it first checks to see if you have a Drupal account. And if it finds an account on the Drupal site that matches that password, it logs you in as just a regular Drupal user without any connection to LDAP at all. But if that Drupal login fails, if it doesn't match the password on the Drupal site, then it checks the LDAP server and sees if you're authenticated there with that password. And if so, then it logs you in. So the way you support this is if you want them using LDAP, you set their password on Drupal to some, random gobbledygook that they can never type. So they're always going to fail when it tests the Drupal password, but then it's going to succeed when it gets to LDAP. But if you want to have a mixed mode where, you want to have some public-facing accounts, for example, let's say you're a company and you're going to manage all of your company employees through LDAP, because those are going to have some real critical access control rules. They're going to get to see some really private information about the company on the site. But now you want to have a public portal on the same site. You might want to still have the public be able to register on your site to get newsletters or maybe access to some special areas. You don't want to have to put all them in your LDAP server. You just want to manage them on the Drupal site. So that mixed mode is something that's fairly new that we added to Atrium. Let's see, I think we're doing okay on time. Okay, we have 3 main plugins out of the box in Atrium, the big 3. We have discussions, we have events, and we have documents or wikis. So talking about discussions, we tried to make each one of those pretty full-featured, but none of them are going to be best in class. Like if you're looking for the world's best discussion forum system, this isn't it. It's pretty darn good. It's better than forum module. But none of these things are going to be best in class. And that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about Atrium integrating with your systems of choice. So like document management, we'll get to in a second. We're still using Drupal, so it's not going to have the world's best document management. But if you need that, go integrate with Alfresco. So for discussions, what do we support? So we have all that access control. So we have public and private forums, kind of semi-public, semi-private. Like you can control that down to, these 3 guys can have a discussion, or the whole public can have a discussion, and all the moderation and tools that go with those. We support 2 kinds of notifications, and this is a distinction that other distributions kind of miss, I think, and some other tools miss, which is, it's great to go follow something, right, or subscribe to something. I call that the kind of pull notification. In other words, I'm browsing the site, I see something really interesting, and it's like, hey, if somebody updates this, I want to hear about it. So I subscribe to it or I follow it, and whenever somebody posts to it, I'm going to get an email message. So I'm pulling that email to me. I'm saying I'm interested in that. Okay. So a lot of systems do that. What Atrium also does is what I call push notifications. And a push notification is, I'm involved in a project collaboration with you, and I just did something that I think you need to know about, so I'm going to push a notification to you. Whenever I add a new reply, I'm going to make sure that you get that. So that's making sure that your project team gets informed. And Atrium 1 did this. Atrium 1 had all those checkboxes at the bottom where when you wanted to write a new blog post, you could check next to everyone's name, and it would send them email. And people would forget to check things, people would check the wrong things, like it was a real mess. So in Atrium 2, we set this notification system up with our team and group concept. So if you've already created your little project team, you don't have to check each one of their names when you notify. You just put the team in there, and it will make sure that the team gets notified. What's nice about that is now you don't have individual users assigned to individual posts. Like what's worse is you go to someone pulls open an old discussion that's a year old and they reply to it, right? And the notifications that were checked on that is someone that doesn't even work at the company anymore, right? But they get this email spam for a project they're not even on. Well, when you put the team associated with it, as people come and go from the team, it's going to take care of that. You take someone out of the team, they're no longer going to get that notification. And same thing for group. If you're using like your faculty group or your project manager group, if you take them out of that group, they're no longer going to get notified. So a lot of work on notifications, which is what this little bar is over here. We have full media support in Atrium 2. Media is a tough thing in Drupal. We had a little discussion about this yesterday. The media modules had an interesting history. It's had some rough times, but we've actually worked on trying to kind of patch and improve the media module with Atrium. In particular, what we needed to support with media is the private file system. So because of the data privacy in Atrium 2, pretty much everything is being stored in the private Drupal file system. Now you can support both, so in your public forums, things are in the public file system. And it supports that mixed mode that you can do in D7 that you couldn't do in D6. But with media support, what we mean by the private file system there is if I attach a file to this discussion thread, and let's say this discussion thread is in some private discussion forum, like it's just for the faculty of the university, and I'm going to attach some salary listing or something to this, I need to make sure that that file attachment is private. And in regular media module, when you attach something that went in the public system, if you knew the magic URL, you could type that in and you could see it. And it was kind of this security by obscurity business of you just kind of hoped that nobody guessed the URL, and so you threw them over kind of random tokens on it and did stuff like that. But here you're supporting the full private file system, and what Atrium is doing is when you go to access a private file, it's using the file entity access controls, and it's checking to see if that file is attached to any particular node, and then it checks to see if you have access to that node. So if you don't have access to read this discussion, you don't get access to see that file. Now it's important to note that that only happens when you attach files to things. If you actually just embed something in the WYSIWYG, then all bets are off. Like if you put some image of cats in your WYSIWYG, there is a URL someone can use to get that image. So if you want that cat image to be private, put it as an attachment. But that private media support is really key. We have that all throughout Atrium, so supporting images, file uploads like PDFs, docs, spreadsheets. We support full videos, so you can embed videos, both YouTube and Vimeo. So you'll see, for example, up here, there's this widget called Documents and Media, and what it's showing us is, there's all these replies, and you'll notice the replies get collapsed by default because it knows you've already read them. So if you have an unread reply, they're expanded automatically. So if you go to a new post, or if you go to an existing discussion, and there's been 50 replies, but there's one new one at the bottom, the first 49 are going to be collapsed, the new one's going to be expanded. The next time you do it, it will be collapsed. So what happens is people add attachments here. Like you'll be in a thread where you're discussing with the client, the design of my website, and it's like, okay, here's a new wireframe, and here's a new wireframe, and here, like they post 5 different wireframes to that thread. And you have to go kind of searching through the replies to see where they are. What this widget is doing is kind of aggregating all of your attachments into one place. So it's saying in reply number 2, you had this image, and reply number 3, you had this image. When you click on these, you get a nice lightbox display that you can navigate. If these were videos, you would see a little thumbnail here, and when you click on it, you get the playable video. We do obviously have a WYSIWYG. It comes from Panoply. Panoply right now is using TinyMCE. I know that they're looking forward to Drupal 8 and what they might need to do to change that. But again, that's their problem now. I don't have to worry about it because we're just going to inherit whatever they do in Panoply. So it's a good WYSIWYG. It's responsive. We also added support for the Markdown module. So if you want to do kind of wiki Markdown stuff like in Atrium 1, you can do that. And then finally, the other big feature is when you reply to these things, you're going to get these notifications, right? So I get a notification saying, Joe just posted to this thread. And I'm in my email client. Wouldn't it be nice in my email client to just hit reply and have that reply get posted back to Atrium? And so we support that now in Atrium 2. Atrium 1 tried to do that. It never worked really well, like at all. So that's in Atrium 2 now. So now you can use your email client to interact. So knowledge management. This is wiki functionality, or just being able to post documentation and files. So I don't call it document management because that's a really loaded word. This is not really document management, but it is a way to create documentation, whether it's wiki type documentation or whether these are Word documents and PDF documents. The reason it's not full document management is Drupal is, of course, just storing these on the local file system. There's no real revision control of documents. There's no like simultaneous editing, checkout, check-in kind of stuff. So, most people these days have got a better document management solution, like maybe they're using Google Docs or they're using Alfresco. You're not going to replace that with Atrium. You're going to want to integrate with that. But if you do want to just need some basic ways to do this, we have kind of basic wiki functionality. You can create a kind of menu within every section in Atrium. Kind of has its own little menu, so you can create your kind of hierarchical document layout. So this is very similar to the notebook module that was in Atrium 1. We're not using the book module. We're just using the standard menu system in Drupal. The advantage being there's a lot of other cool stuff that works great with menus, and the book module was pretty clunky. You again get the full media support. You get all the privacy, you get all the notifications. So all that stuff we talked about for discussions and discussion forums feeds into your wiki and documents. Event management was another big area that we just added really late in the alpha and worked on actually more in the alpha. So event management, you can go and create an event just like you could in Atrium 1, but we go further than just supporting time, basically. An event is more than just something that occurs at a certain time. there's a location component involved in an event. Like here, we're having this event. We're having it at George Washington University in DC in a room, whatever the room is that they picked, 412 or something, and it happened at 10 o'clock. All of that is information about this event. So we have the full time stuff. We bring in the date module for Drupal, so you can have full day events, multi-day events. You can have repeating events. You can say you have a meeting that's on the last Monday of every month, except on full moon, or whatever the date module lets you do. So all that's there. But when we looked at location, there's this location module, if you've used, that you now have fields for your street address and your city and your state and your zip code and your country and your county and all these fields that you've got to fill in. And that just isn't a good user experience anymore. I mean, that's what people used in the D6 days. But again, we're trying to build a best-in-class. Let's start over and look at the best solutions that probably invented elsewhere. So we started looking at some of the more the geo fields, the geocoder stuff. And actually, Brandon's got a mapping session this afternoon on this if you want to go learn more about his module with this. But basically, it's more like what you're used to in Google, in Google Maps. So your location field for your event is just a text field. There's no city, state, zip code stuff. It's just a text field. You just type something into that. Like in this case, you type in George Washington University, Alexandria, Virginia. Well, Google knows where that is. In this case, I typed in Phase 2, Alexandria, Virginia. It actually knows where the Phase 2 office is. It gives us a little map with a little icon for the Phase 2 office. I don't have to know my street address or zip code. And in particular, we also support a way to put your virtual information in there, because meetings and events aren't just physical anymore. You typically have a webinar link. Go to gotomeeting.com and fill in this ID number. So you can add that to your location field as well. And you can use the little breakpoint thing if you're used to using like the body field to separate your summary from your main body, and there's that little button in the WYSIWYG that adds a little break line. You just put a break line between your geo field and your virtual stuff, and the geo field won't get confused, and it will still show you where your event is. What that also means is, in addition to that text location field, you've got a set of coordinates stored for that node. There's actually a hidden geo field that is going to store your longitude and latitude. So now you can do things like, let's say you're on a mobile device and so you know the user's location. You could actually create a view that showed you your nearby events by comparing your mobile location with what's stored for your events. So just really cool stuff you could never do before. We support color coding. You can color code these events based on taxonomies that are either global to your site or specific to your space. You can color code them based upon what space they're in. So imagine in that university example, we stick a calendar up on the top level physical sciences page. It's going to show us events from all the departments like physics and chemistry, and you can have that be color coded based on those spaces. So that's cool. Add this event support. There's a little button that says add to calendar. When you click on that, it will give you options to add this event to your Google Calendar or Outlook or any other calendar that you might have. Has iCal import, so I can type in a URL of my Google Calendar, and it will use feeds to pull all those events into my Drupal site and keep them updated. So really rich event management functionality. What about Case Tracker? This is a really common question. Who used Case Tracker? Curious. I'm sorry. I mean, Case Tracker, I shouldn't say that. I know the Case Tracker developer. I mean, we all try our best. The trouble is everyone has different needs for issue tracking. And Case Tracker was a particular solution for a particular set of needs that everyone kind of tried to force their process and workflow into, and it just wasn't really great for everybody. And when we looked at Atrium 2, it's like, look, we're not going to build the world's best issue tracking system. There's better systems out there. There's things like Jira. There's Fog Bugsy. It's like, are you tracking software bugs? Are you tracking issues? Are you a customer help desk? Like, your needs are different, and we're not going to solve those with a simple case tracker tool. Of course, the other problem was when we started this a year ago, the case tracker tool in D7 wasn't available, so we couldn't use it. So we do not have a issue tracker in core. That's a community enhancement using the pluggable extensibility I talked about. Now, what was funny is early on in the alpha, a guy from the community, David Snowpeck, said, hey, I need an issue tracker. I'm going to build this thing called Work Tracker, and I'm going to contribute it to the community. So if you go to the project page for Open Atrium, there's a link to that. give it a try. Maybe that's what you need for issue tracking. Maybe you need something else. We're going to be focusing on making kind of integrations with more enterprise level tools. What about migration? A lot of you did mention you're using Atrium 1. I'm sorry we didn't solve the problem of migrating Drupal 6 to Drupal 7 for you with like a one-click button or something. It's hard. We know this. Like I said, use this as an opportunity to re-architect your D7 site. The world's changed in the few years that you've probably had since you built your website. You can probably do something better with some of the things that are in D7. It's really worth the time. Your website should not be something static that you just let sit and decay. However, what we are doing is helping you with your data. So we will create some migrate scripts during this beta phase to, for example, migrate your blogs into discussions, migrate your notebooks into the documents, migrate your events into events. For Case Tracker, it's going to kind of depend on what other tool you need. You know, the Work Tracker guy might help with that. The Case Tracker guys, by the way, are working on a Case Tracker now, so there might actually be a Case Tracker in D7 that you can migrate to. We will also do help with getting your users across and getting your old groups into the new spaces, so kind of that core level data. But those will be migrate scripts. You're going to need someone that knows Drupal to run those. You're going to need someone to customize your site. So it's not just kind of a one-click upgrade, unfortunately. So as I mentioned, we released the beta on Saturday, and so you can go to the project page on Drupal.org/Open Atrium. You can download it there. There's a nice issue queue. This is the place to post bug reports now. And so what do we mean by beta? So beta means we've completed what we call the minimal viable functionality. So what's in the box is going to be what's in the box. We're not planning any big new plugins or functionality to be added. It's stable and compatible moving forward, which means that as we do change things and fix bugs and enhance things, if you're currently using a beta and you went to like beta 6 or 7 or however many betas we end up having, your site's going to stay working. It's going to automatically upgrade your data and migrate it forward. If you are on alpha already, try beta. Things might break. We never promised compatibility going from alpha to beta. But we are promising compatibility going from beta forward, which means from beta into full release as well. So if you start playing with beta, you can feel comfortable that your site's going to keep working when you get the full release in the future. We also got functional testing in place. So we have some automated testing. It tells us every time we make a push if we've broken things. Unfortunately, it doesn't necessarily stop us from making that push. It just tells us after the fact that, hey, you just broke it, and then we try to go fix it. So that's why I apologize. We're already on beta 3. We had some issues with the Drupal packaging and the Pantheon packaging that we had to deal with this week. We do have initial documentation. So if you go to the products.phase2technology.com site, we have the documentation there for both users and also if you're a developer and you want to learn how to write plugins. But writing plugins is super, super easy. You basically add 2 fields to your content type, and you can actually do that in the UI without writing any code. So actually in my demos, I show building an FAQ module for Atrium, where I create a new custom FAQ content type. I add a couple fields and proof it's done. I never had to write any PHP code. So all that documentation is out there. It is right now intended for site builders. It's not really intended for like a SaaS application where you're going to go spin up Open Atrium and start using it to manage your project necessarily. The interface is probably still going to be a little clunky for that. But it's great for people building sites if you want to build a collaboration site and use this as a base for your Drupal. So it's viable for early adopter sites. So our roadmap for the future, what are we doing now that the beta's out? We're going to be focusing more on, for example, demo content and tutorial content so we can help those end users use the product. So we're going to be improving the mobile experience. Right now it's still got some issues on mobile. If you start kind of collapsing it, you'll see the toolbar do some weird stuff. So we'll be working on that. We're going to be creating those data migration scripts, doing cleaning and polishing. And of course the big question is when? So Q4, so this fall, you'll see the public release. You can also just take it for a spin if you don't want to go through a big install process. You can go to Pantheon, getpantheon.com. The beta is now up on Pantheon. If you actually go to our openatrium.com site, on the openatrium.com site there's a try on Pantheon button that actually takes you to the link that just, you put in your name and email and it starts spinning up a site for you. You don't have to like answer anything else or sign up or do anything like that. So really, really easy to try it and demo it. If you want to learn more, I mentioned the product site there. That's the official product documentation site. I'm trying to post a lot of information on the Drupal.org project page with webinars. There's an IRC room for the kind of community to help each other. And if you have bigger needs, you need more in-depth training, you need us to scope out a site build for you, any kind of big things like that, definitely contact us at Phase 2. So any questions?
You get these slides online?
I'm sure we'll be posting these slides for CapitalCamp. So my guess is it's going to be go to the CapitalCamp site and look at the session. We'll probably have them posted down there in the session. And then they're obviously also going to have this video available as well. Yep.
You said you allow people to respond to the forum or discussion groups through email.
Mm-hmm.
Do you rely on the email address they're coming from or in the email header?
It does some
security.
Yeah, it does some things with email for security. It also assumes that if I've notified you about a node, that you probably can access that node. So it kind of puts the owner on the person saying the response. It right now is not secure in the sense that the way it knows what topic to reply to is just a number in the subject line. And so it says, oh, there's like the number 25. That's like node 25. I could change it to node 26 and it would go through. So that's one of the security improvements is we're going to tokenize and security guise that thing. So we'll take care of that. Yep.
Included the Jira plugins?
We have done an interesting amount with the Jira plugins. Actually, our CTO, Frank, at DrupalCon was curious about how easy it was to write an Atrium plugin. So we had a hackathon on the day after DrupalCon. So he's like, how far can I get with Jira in 4 hours? And he got to the point where you could drop a widget on the page that shows you your issues for a particular project and lets you manipulate them and do a lot of stuff like that. So I'm not quite sure what mechanism we're going to make that available in right now. It's not currently on Drupal.org and probably won't be. But contact us if you're interested in that kind of stuff. Other questions? We still have a couple of minutes. Yep.
Does the events support RSVP or ticketing?
So the events don't currently support RSVP. They support the notification system, so I can notify people that I'm having an event. But if you want to do like event registration stuff, you would probably do it the same way you're doing now, which is like you're going to put like a what's the Eventbrite key or something like that, right? You're still going to use, like I say, these are not meant to be kind of the ultimate solutions to these things,
right,
but it's going to integrate. But it would be really easy. Like typically, you go to Eventbrite, it says stick this code on your event page, right? So you would then go back to your event page. You would say customize page, create new text widget, plop that thing in. Now you've got that on your event page. So. Yep.
You mentioned iCal import. Do you have iCal export?
Yeah. So there is also iCal export. The add to calendar. Or the add this to calendar does it for individual events, but then when you look at a calendar view on a page, there's a little iCal button in the bottom corner that will export that whole calendar to iCal. Yep.
You know if it would support like using the storage API for all file attachments, put them out on S3 instead of locally? Is there a way to configure
It
that?
should if it's done in a way that works with the media module. So the media module is using the file entity system. So as long as something is working well with that and not kind of going out of the box in Drupal, then it's probably just going to work. If it goes outside that, then you might have to add a separate attachment, some other field to your documents that point to whatever that module adds. So, but I mean, this is Drupal, so I get asked a lot of questions of this functionality, that functionality. In general, if there's a Drupal module for it, things are looking really good. Making that Drupal module work with Atrium is pretty straightforward if it doesn't already. Obviously, if it already works with organic groups, you're probably good to go. But adding that's pretty straightforward. So it's still Drupal. Well,